In bird photography, excuse me, birds in flight is one of the most challenging aspects to the whole subject. And trying to capture motion is at the heart of that. Motion can be captured in a number of ways. You can either do that through freezing the action or through using motion blur. To take it to the next level is a thing which is known as sequence photography or action sequence photography to show birds in action. The basic premise of it is to capture a number of images in a sequence, and then what you do is you then stitch them together to display that subject in motion. In order to do that, you will have to use Photoshop, or that's what I'm going to use in this video. Now, if I can do it, I can assure you anybody can do it. I'm completely self-taught. I'm not the most IT literate person in the world, so if I can do it, anybody can do it. I've also put together a PDF document which is attached below, which takes you through the step-by-step procedure for putting an action sequence together. So in this video, what we'll do is we'll look at how to create a sequence photograph in order to capture birds in action. What we'll do, we'll look at the software that you need to be using. We'll look at the types of images that you need to be taking for an action sequence photograph. We'll look at the preparation you have to put in beforehand, and then I'll take you through my step-to-step approach through Photoshop using the PDF document I spoke about earlier, and I'll give you some top tips along the way. So what kind of software do we need to put this action sequence photograph together? Well, the first thing that I will do is, once I've taken I always shoot in RAW, so what I'll do is I'll go into Lightroom to begin with, and I'll do all my post-processing through Lightroom. Once that's done, then you need to load your images onto Photoshop, and that's the main piece of software that we're going to look at. And as I said, if I can do it, anybody can do it, and I really truly mean that. And I really only use Photoshop for doing these types of photographs. Top tip: slow flying birds. If you really want to get great action shots, I would advise you, when you begin your journey to try and put these kind of shots together, to start with slow flying birds, things like herons, swans, owls. And then once you're happy with your images, you can then move on to trying to get faster moving birds, especially the kingfisher. A sequence action shot or image is like telling a short story. And like all stories, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. What you're going to have to do is you need to look at trying to frame up your images so that you can see where your subject is coming from, the direction that it's going in, and where the subject is likely to end up. Top tip, side on. Try to visualize how the subject will look in multiple positions throughout the frame. A side on view is normally the best approach for action sequence photography, and it's important how you actually position your camera, and I'll explain that in a little bit of detail as well. So always try to aim to try and get side on to your subject. There's an unwritten rule in bird photography. I don't know where it come from, but this is what I've read and what I understand, and I believe it's true as well. That when photographing a group of birds or putting a group of birds in a sequence, there should be an odd number of subjects. Apparently, it's better on the eye than even numbers. So I'm led to believe. So look at using an odd number of images in your action sequence photograph. When it comes to putting these action sequence images together, you need to do a bit of preparation beforehand. So what do we need to prepare? Well, first of all, we need to look at equipment that we're going to need. Firstly, you're going to need a tripod. That's essential to keep your camera completely still so that your background is consistent throughout the sequence of images that you're going to be taking. If you've got a remote control, that can be very useful, and that ensures that the camera is not disturbed whilst you're actually taking the images. And I'll show you a sequence set of images that I took for the kingfisher sequence that you've already seen. You're obviously going to need a camera. I shoot with a Canon R5, and I also shoot with the lens that I'll use is a an RF 100 to 500, again a Canon lens. I'm not going to go into the details of those. You obviously need to understand your own camera lens and equipment, and then the final piece of equipment that you need is the software that I've already discussed, Lightroom and Photoshop. Well, what to do now is briefly explain to you why you need that equipment and just exactly the type of images you can get. These two images of the Kingfishers, I would, for me personally, the best two action sequence shots that I've taken. What you need to understand is that when you're doing this type of photography is just how fast birds can move. And you see it in this very short clip that I'm going to show you. From the time the kingfisher leaves the perch to the time the kingfisher lands back on the perch, you're talking 2 seconds. And here it is. I'm sure that you'll see from that very short clip of that kingfisher just how important it is to have the right equipment in place, prepared and ready to get an action shot like that. So important. Top tip, steady camera. Our images need to be in perfect alignment, and that helps to make it easier to blend our photographs together in Photoshop. Therefore, you need a tripod to keep the camera still. Using a remote control also, or a remote release, is also useful, as it means that we don't have to touch the camera during the sequence. And again, that helps us to get good, solid, sharp images. So what camera settings are we going to need to set? Well, that's all dependent on actually the bird that you're photographing. Obviously, the settings that you'll use for photoing a kingfisher are going to be completely different from the settings, talking exposure settings here, that you're going to use for photographing, let's say, a barn owl, namely your shutter speed. The settings that I set on my camera is I always shoot in manual and auto ISO. That just gives me greater control over the shutter speed. Your autofocus mode, again, will depend on the subject that you're photographing. Again, you need to take into account how fast the bird is going to be. I always shoot in AFC continuous, or servo as it's known in Canon. I always shoot in RAW so that I can manage the post-processing in Lightroom. I set my frame rate to the highest frame rate possible. You want as many shots as you possibly can get, so that you can then pick out the best shots that you're going to stitch together in your final action sequence photograph. Top tip, pre-focus. Fast moving subjects can be a challenge for the camera's autofocus system. If we know where the subject's going to be, so as an example, it's going to land on a particular perch, we can then pre-focus beforehand on that perch, ready for the bird to go into action. So, pre-focus. What I want to do now is take you through step by step how I put an action sequence photograph together. And what we'll do is we'll look at these short-eared owl photographs that I've taken, and we'll put them together as an action sequence shot. If you follow the PDF that I've left underneath, we'll follow it step by step. Step number 1 is to open Photoshop, which we've done. Step number 2 is to go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. Then go to Browse, go to the folder where your photographs are in, and upload them. In this case, 4 pictures. 3 of the short-eared owl and 1 of the moorland, which is the background. Okay. We then highlight the images, press OK, and that's the images now being downloaded into Photoshop. Once they're in here, we then need to arrange them so they're in order. So in this case, I want the background at the bottom. So if I just unhide the birds to start with. So I've got the background at the bottom. That's the centre one. That's the first one. So that needs to come down to just sit above the habitat, and that's the last one. So the pictures are now in order. So step number 4 is to select the image and make sure that the background is the base layer. So I need to hide the other images and the background, and this is the image that I'm going to work on. So we then need to go to select the object selection tool, the square one. And step 6 is we select the image to move. So we place it over there, double click. And that's the Photoshop recognised it. We then go to step 7, select and mask. Go down to Shift Edge, select and mask. Go down to Shift Edge and take that to 3%. And what that's doing is it's just reducing the pixels around the bird to make sure that you don't have a halo around the bird. And that's very important, that part. We then go to Output 2 and choose Layer Mask and press OK. If we then reveal the background, we'll see that the bird is now sitting in the frame where we want it to be. So what we could do now is just hit the move tool, and then we can move the bird anywhere we want in the frame. So we'll leave it there. Once we've moved the bird to where we want it, the next thing we then need to do is work on the next image. So if we hide the previous image in the background, highlight the image that we want, click on it, again, go to the object selection tool, square one, click on the bird, again, go select and mask. So we're just basically repeating what we did before. 3%. Output 2, layer mask, OK. Again, if we reveal the previous bird in the background, we can then move, using the move tool, the bird to wherever we want it. There. And then we repeat it again for the final bird. So, hide, 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 reveal, object selection tool, square object, click on the bird. Again, computer highlights the bird, select and mask, shift edge, 3%, output 2, layer mask, OK. And then if we reveal everything else, we can then move a bird using the move tool to its final position. So that's step 9, where we've repeated steps 4 to 8 for each bird. Step 10 is to go to layer, layer, merge visible. Step 11, go to the crop tool, and then we just crop it to what we want, or the composition that you're after. And that to me looks about right. Give the bird enough room to fly into. Hit crop. There's a final image. Go File, Export, Export As. I'm saving it as a JPEG, high quality. Photoshop is just downloading it as a JPEG, and then go Export to the file that I want. Short-eared owl demo. Save. And that's it. Top tip, practice Practice, practice, practice. It speaks for itself. Stick with it. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's a real challenge, but if you get it right, it is ever so rewarding. Okay, as you've seen, it's not the easiest of things to do, but as I said at the very beginning, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And you can get some fantastic images for action sequence photography, especially birds in flight. All I would ask is that if you've liked this video, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography. It's completely free, it doesn't cost anything. And what that does is it helps me to grow the channel and allow me to share my experience and my knowledge with other like-minded people around the world. So, until the next time, stay safe, take care, and hope to see you soon. Bye for now.